Socks. It's episode 53 of the Comic Watchers Show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm your host, Matt Meyer, coming at you from Oklahoma City. With me are my fellow Comic Watchers, Nick from Carthage, Texas, and Mike Eakins from Virginia Beach. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen.
I love the literalness going on there, Mike. Thank you very much. We've got an awesome show for you this week. We are talking about DCeased and from DC Black Label, The Last Gods #1. But before we get to that, we've got some news. Mike, our newest co-host, has taken over job duties on our news segment. So, Mike, tell me, thrill me, what do you have this week?
First off, we're going to talk about R.E. Silva's cryptic, if you will, IG post about his special edition X-Glass that everyone got at the wrap-up for Hawks and Pox. But in the background, you saw a sketch of Mojo and Mr. Sinister. So everyone, of course, was ablaze with, oh, that could be X-Men 5, or that could, well, you know, is there another X book in there? And obviously, we don't do a lot of speculation for Comic Watch, but this was still fun to kind of get into, because right now his Instagram, I think it has over like 2,500 hits, rounding out 3,000 just for one single pick, and that's really all it was. It's just a pick, you know. And then someone found out, you know, that, oh, look, there's Mojo and Mr. Sinister, so there has to be something there, but it's really just a sketch. But it's fun, so who knows. He is on the hook for X-Men 5, so maybe that's just a little treat, little panel for 5, but who knows? Just stay tuned to Comic Watch, obviously, for any breaking news. Got a few new releases in Marvel's effort to keep bringing Robert E. Howard's characters to Marvel other than Conan. Obviously, Dark Agnes was announced. She's getting a 5-issue limited series, which I believe is starting in January. She is going to get her first print in Marvel and Conan's up-and-coming mini-series where he takes on Mephisto and sails out to Las Vegas by the way of Dark Agnes. So that should be pretty good to keep an eye out for that. Image and Top Cow have announced the Matt Hawkins and Colleen Durand book, The Clock, which is it's going to be set in a dystopian setting, pretty much dealing with like a cancer outbreak. And so they're kind of the doctor that's I don't want to put this, the doctor that's going to be kind of like overseeing everything, how to like to cancel and stop the outbreak and stuff. And when it hits home, that's when he kind of takes it into a more serious mode and realizes that World War III is pretty much kind of on its edge. So that looks pretty good as well. Other than that, kind of slow for the news. We do have some sneak peeks up on the website, including we just put up Marvel Zombie Resurrection. We have Silver Surfer 5, that's going to end that series. DC's Infected Scarab 1 and Batman and the Outsiders annual 1 is also up there on the website. Last for the news, just a little tidbit. Tyler Hoechlin and Elizabeth Tulloch have been penned to do a modern version of Superman and Lois for the CW, right? Like, oh, we haven't heard that one before. But no, it should be good, though, because we haven't had a decent, or really any Superman and Lois, I think, since like the late 90s, I think, is when the DK show kind of wrapped up. So it should be good. It's going to be a standalone. It's not going to be part of the Arrowverse. So there really hasn't been a release date for that. So it's a TBD. And that's really, unless you gentlemen have something breaking that just happened, that is all I have for the news.
No. I just personally wanted to say I really liked Hoechlin's portrayal as the Man of Steel. I mean, it's a little vanilla, but at the same time, maybe a little vanilla is what we needed in the wake of the Snyder and Cavill debacle. If I may editorialize slightly. But he's been good. You know, I don't need to have my mind blown. Right. I just need a good Superman.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
And I'm looking really forward to that.
I have to ask though, like, does this mean that the Man of Steel sequel is postponed even further?
I think at this point, speculating about anything DC related on Warner Brothers production slate is very, very foolish. Like at this point, I'll be pushing 50 instead of 40 before we get the Flash movie, and it'll be on its 96th director. So not even Grant Morrison will be able to crack it. So, yeah. All right. Well, hey, Mike, thank you for the news. So, yeah, like I was saying, the books we're going to talk about this week, we're going to start with DCeased, number 6. That is by Tom Taylor and Trevor Hairsine, wrapping up the Zombie Apocalypse Comes to the DC Universe miniseries that has been met with lots and lots of critical and fan acclaim. Man, this is it. This is the end. I don't want to get too spoilery with it, just because, it's the end. Mm-hmm. But, golly, Mike, this has been an awesome series. What have you thought about it?
I'm not gonna lie, I was slow to get into it because it's a zombie story. Those zombie stories are like bowls of soup. Not bad, but how many times can you have, the same bowl of soup, right? But their different take on a common story, I thought was really good. Obviously, they picked the right person in Tom Taylor to do a story like this, to take, it's just not your run-of-the-mill zombie. Person A gets infected and person infects person B, and yada yada yada. There was just times where, and especially like for one, me not being a huge Superman fan, start the booze now. I thought even Superman's portrayal in this, I was rooting for him. I felt for him, and just kind of his struggle. You almost like kind of felt that he was racing against, time. And like I said, I don't want to spoil it, too much, but, and especially the end, I thought I was like, wow, I really feel bad for this guy. Everything he did, and you just like, God, he can't catch a break, obviously. But I will say one thing though, that I really want a zombies birds of prey right now. If we could just do, that one panel right there was like, that's why it, was really good. And I think that's kind of that right there enough sold me on the whole series. But there was just some good moments, like Dinah getting the ring. I thought her getting the ring and just kind of automatically just going and just taking it. There was no training. She took no classes on how to be a lantern. She just kind of just took the helm and went for the gusto, and really was just a fun time. This whole series was fun. I love the fact that it's not going to be any type of reset. They're not, the infected aren't going to stay the infected. It was just a good, fun story that I thought DC planted very well, being the month of October. They're ending it right before, Halloween, or, obviously, right on Halloween. But yeah, it was fun, and I think it's, maybe there'll be more, who knows? But I just think my thing for me was, I wish this would go for a few more issues, just for character development, because you wanted to see more of the key scenes and the key panels that had you like cheering. Like for me, the Captain Atom and Ray Palmer scene was really awesome. I was like, that's really cool. And you almost like, God, I need more. We can spend a few more issues just, doing that, and almost really kind of focusing more on the infected and and all that. Yeah, but yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Nick, what say you?
Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat, that I didn't jump into it immediately. I read the first issue and thought the concept was cool, and then fell out of it. Big zombie person, but DC has so much. You can only take so much. So it was just one that got put on the back burner, and I didn't doubt that it was any good. I mean, Tom Taylor writing this stuff, it's going to be dramatic and on this grand scale, and pulled off really well. And to the people who didn't like Superman, it is interesting because, excuse me, for every time that there's a character that's focused on that you don't really care for, there's 5 more that you really love that get the spotlight too. There's so many epic moments in it that just work so well for it. And yeah, Dinah having the ring is everything. Like, this is the Green Lantern that we deserve for this world. So cool. And in issue 6 particularly, you have these grand moments that are building up to a finale that not to get too spoilery, is it makes the series worthwhile. I was worried about how many consequences this run would actually have, or is it going to function like a typical annual where it basically happens and you don't really care much after you put it down. But this one you want to continue. Like, you just want to keep seeing more and more of it. And I love that it was just a snowball of, I mentioned it was almost like The Walking Dead, where shit just gets worse and worse and it just spirals out of control.
Yeah.
And I thought they're able to pull that off because of these superheroes and all of their abilities. That's why you get these, I thought, epic moments of Superman and Flash when Flash has the actual disease and he's carrying this all around and he says, I can't catch him, but I can meet him. That was cool. It's the zombie slaying on a superhero level, really cool stuff. And that pulls me in. Harley and Ivy pull in like exactly the type of chemistry that I want from them, and I would read a spin-off of them in this world again. Like, we don't need it. We have so many, but I'd still read it.
Right now. There's literally one right now.
Yeah, like, take that and set it in this world. I think it would work a lot better, actually, because they are spinning that one off of Heroes in Crisis, and this one's a way better would have been. Yeah.
Yes.
But like, how cool was Wonder Woman forging the sword of Athena? That was so sick. I loved how her different traits played into the theme itself. The goddess of war was the goddess of craft and the goddess of mathematics. How they all like became intertwined within the story, and how that sword became the key. Really cool stuff. It works because it's able to play on the dynamics of these superheroes really well, and it's a zombie story at its heart. I mean, it's a horror zombie story. You're not getting away from it. They try to throw in the equation every now and then just as a reminder, but it's a zombie story. It plays out like a zombie story, and it's DC superheroes fighting zombies. What more could you want, really? And it gives you everything that you expect out of a story like that and more. So, great stuff. Art was a little okay in some spots, but I feel like it's not really all that worth diving into because it is worth reading. Matt, what do you think?
Well, I just want to start by saying, can we have a round of applause for Tom Taylor just in general? This guy is awesome. He has been doing, and I mean, pretty consistently for several years now, just some of the best writing in the industry, and I don't think the guy gets the props he deserves. From the DCeased to the current volume of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, he just writes character-first stories that ring true and hit those character beats flawlessly, note for note, and then everything else falls into place behind that. And I mean, usually with a lot of writers, not all, but it's typically one or the other. But Tom Taylor delivers the total package, and he's absolutely a workhorse and deserves all the acclaim. And I don't think he's won an Eisner yet, but man, he freaking deserves it. So to get into this particular series, and again, I don't want to get too much into spoiler territory, execution top to bottom is perfect. All the action beats hit right. The character beats ring true. Like you were saying, the assumption of mantles by the next generation of heroes when the times come is great. And I mean, there are no Taylor's not afraid to kill some darlings in this story. I mean, how accustomed are we to Batman's always saving the day? And Batman gets, okay, spoiler warning from issue, I think, 2. Batman gets taken out really early in this running here.
Yeah.
It falls to everyone else to come together. And everyone reacts and responds in ways that are consistent with the characters that we know. Nobody does anything wild and crazy and out of character. The just the thought of the anti-life equation being manifested as a zombie virus is pretty brilliant, actually. I mean, let's be real. This is smart. And, who was the first to die? Darkseid. So right away, the stakes are through the roof. Issue 6 almost delivered a perfect ending. There's a pretty big Deus Ex Machina in there that I don't want to spoil, but it was pretty convenient. And when it happens, it's like, why didn't this happen a lot sooner? Mm-hmm. Come on. We could have saved a lot of lives here. But it's whatever. Because the execution of the story, I refuse to hang a story based on the ending. If 90% of the story works right up until the end, there's no reason to be dismissive of the story just because one thing at the end didn't quite land right. So that would be foolish. It's clearly setting up a sequel, which I'm really excited for. There were a couple different plot points that did not get resolved. One involved John Constantine, and it stemmed from the Good Day to Die one-shot that tied in. And then there's the revelation about the nature of the virus itself in issue 6 that gets a little ahead of itself, if I may use some wordplay and not spoil too much. But that's out there. And there's a whole big, giant DC universe out there that is ripe for the plucking. So I foresee at least one, probably two for a trilogy, more miniseries to tie into this world. At the beginning, when this thing was first announced, my initial response was, another zombie story, really? Who cares? Why do we need this? This has really proven to be a rare treat where execution just all across the board is so perfect. It's really a treasured story. Like you were saying, Nick, the art didn't quite hit perfectly for me. I think Hairsine is kind of an inconsistent artist, which is why I haven't ever really warmed to him. Especially he seems to have issues with people's faces. But when it comes to big, sexy splash pages, he can really deliver. So, this, that, or the other. DCeased, I just thought was really brilliant. It didn't rewrite the book in any way, but it didn't have to, because it was simply a really good story. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's all I'm asking for. I don't need Watchmen every time. So, guys, final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think to your point about the one shot of John Constantine and some of the plot points that don't get wrapped up, right to the point where it starts to feel like the story is going to cave in on itself because of the weight, it starts to wrap up with this nice finale that, gets you excited for maybe more. Yeah. And I thought that was really well from the creative team, because they start laying these Easter eggs of, there could be more, but it's not to the point where they feel like they're rushing an ending, or it's leaving threads just totally open that the ending doesn't make sense. This is still a very complete story that you can take on its own, and absolutely. I love that about it. Just it hits all those right notes,
Actually, from that perspective, I would compare it to the first Matrix movie.
Ooh,
you don't need the sequels to understand that movie and feel like you've watched a complete story.
Yeah.
So true.
Well enough, yeah.
Mike, did you have any other thoughts on it?
Other than if you're not getting kind of all mushy for the Damien and John parts, you really have no soul. But that's probably for a different episode, But yeah, but no, it was just good. I mean, other than repeating what you guys have already touched on. I mean, it was pretty much perfect in all aspects, and you can really, the readability for me is going to be years and years and years where you can just keep reading it and it's still going to be fresh. It's still going to be new. It's really good. It's marvelous.
Agreed. Absolutely. So, okay. Awesome. Well, moving on to our second book, and by extreme coincidence, we wound up with 2 Marvel books last week and 2 DC books this week, but Roll of the dice. We have The Last God, #1 of 12 from DC Black Label. It is written by Philip Kennedy Johnson and Riccardo Federici. Nick was fortunate enough to get an interview with the author himself, Mr. Johnson. You can check that out on Comic Watch. But Nick, I'm actually going to pass the torch over to you for a little synopsis / intro on this one.
Definitely. I've studied this book enough. When it was announced, I thought this book was written for me. It basically tells the story of Cain and Nun and what happens when the gods of old come down these black stairs and what they do to the realm. They start taking over everything. They start slaughtering people. So a group of god slayers rise up. They make their way up the staircase, this never-ending black staircase full of demons and horrors, and they slaughter everything. And I believe it's King Tyr comes down and, with the head of the beast or the god, and they hail him as God Slayer. The Last God doesn't tell that story. It picks up in a next generation where you discover not everything about that story is what it seems, and you follow this next generation of potential heroes as they unravel this story and figure out, what lies the generation above them is told about that tale. And it sets up something really expansive. I got a chance to talk with him mainly because when it was announced, I was immediately on Twitter just saying, this was a book that feels like it had me in mind. And Philip Kennedy Johnson came on Twitter and we started talking, and that led to an interview where I got to just really dive into, what inspired this series. And it was the first thing I asked because the term is lore hounds for people who are just searching for this fantasy world that is expansive and comprehensive and, goes over all of these years and multi-generations. And that's exactly what he's trying to do with The Last God. So one of the first things I asked was the inspirations, and he said it was Tolkien's The Silmarillion, George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. But for the style and tone of the book, he really surprised me. He said Robert E. Howard, HBO's True Detective Season 1, and he even mentioned a couple of video games, Last of Us and Dark Souls. So he's really pulling in a lot of these elements to create this high fantasy but super dark, gruesome horror story. And it's just, it works so well on so many levels that it was really kind of shocking to read from the first book. I thought that it was something that you have seen before with high fantasy. It can be cumbersome because of how many narrative elements need to be established with lengthy names and all these places and historical events and cultures, and there's just so much to happen. But he was granted somehow by DC this great pass to do almost anything. So he's got original music, artwork, maps, journal entries, text of just, paragraphs of information building this world up. And then on top of that, you've got this 12-issue series. So it almost transcends comics into be this huge, huge epic story. And oh my gosh, you just have to read it. It's brilliant work. It's nowhere near what anything else DC is doing. They've got Harley Quinn and Batman stories for the Black Label. And then you have The Last God. Where did this come from? Like, I was so shocked to see it. But oh my gosh, I'm trying to just take it for what it is. And it feels nothing like DC Comics. So while I question, what that is for the brand and what they're doing with the Black Label, if this is the direction, I'm here for it because this is great. They've allowed him to do something amazing. And these artists, I believe it's Riccardo Federici who's doing the art with Dean White and Sonny Go. But there's also a lot more than that because there's these music composers and the people who are helping build the world with text and journals. And there's a huge team involved in this. It's almost like a production. And the book feels like that. It's very grand, and the production value is just awesome. So the story is a lot to take in. And I think that's something that you kind of have to consider. It's not going to be, the Amazing Spider-Man 1 where he punches a baddie and goes home and that's the end of the book. This is very much not that. And I'm here for it. This is what I love. It lets you deep dive if you want to, and you can also just read through it and say, that's cool, I'm coming back for the next one. But if you want to, there's so much to take in. Just so much information and so much lore. Amazing. Couldn't be here for it more. The high fantasy and dark horror is a perfect blend on pretty much every level. Right when you think it's too much high fantasy, it's gore and grotesque horror. Just beautiful. Mike, what'd you think?
Yeah, I think you to piggyback off that. I mean, just right when you were kind of settling into like a Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings type vibe, you were almost, it's like now you're in some horror slasher movie, and the opening scenes where with the stair, with the stairs and everything like that, just going up with the God Slayers, which really set the tone. And then it takes you to almost like, the now, but now when they're figuring out like, oh, maybe the last God isn't, killed. And now we got to sit here and save pretty much humanity in a sense. It's super layered. I found kind of almost like rereading it, because as you said, I mean, there's so much to it. And to me, I didn't think after that first read, I was like, I need to go back, because you almost felt like you missed something if you just, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're going to treat it like, Spider-Man or, Superman, whatever, just a normal comic. But I just found myself kind of going back and just layer after layer after layer. But, it's almost, it's like the perfect blend. It's like if, He-Man and the Warlord got together and played D&D, this would be the outcome. I mean, this is that, it has your high fantasy, and when you're done with that, you can go and, you got all these demons and monsters that are just everywhere. It's a perfect blend. It really is. I mean, the story I think sets up perfectly for what's coming. I don't think they gave you too much, but it's definitely a good rope-in storyline to keep you coming back. The art was fabulous. Art was top-notch. At times, it was you had to look at the label. I know it's like DC Black label, but as you said, I mean this isn't DC stuff. This is completely something that it's not your Batman or your Joker or your Harley. The stories great stories, but we read them regardless if they're Black label or the regular. A Batman story is going to be a Batman story. You can only do so much with them. That hasn't been done in his 80 years, but this is good. I'm really interested in the next issues and see where it takes us, but it was a good story.
Awesome. Yeah. So fantasy's not quite in my wheelhouse, generally speaking. Lord of the Rings, some of my favorite movies ever. Game of Thrones fan. That's about it. Princess Bride. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Just not, it's just not a genre that I typically respond to. And I don't have anything against it for that. But all in all, the sheer amount of attention to detail and world building, those are things that are always going to catch my attention. Because it shows thoughtfulness and deliberation and just something that has been thought out so well on so many different levels. The Last God succeeds in that. It sets us up in both a world and a situation that has the potential to get incredibly expansive, which was by design. Multi-generational, the world you knew or you thought you knew was a lie type stuff, and it works.
Yeah.
King Tyr appears to have some pretty major skeletons in his closet, other than the fact that allegedly the death of the last god, Cain Anun, was it the god's name Cain Anun? Am I getting that wrong? That's the land they live in, isn't it?
Right. Yes, the realm is
okay.
canon.
Forgive me. The titular last god may not have been as slain, but there's some other stuff too. Tyr maybe did some really bad stuff along the way, and we're going to find out more. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I think at 12 issues, this is probably going to be the tip of the iceberg. I mean, just the way that Kennedy Johnson is, and all the collaborators on this book are throwing in all these little extra details, all of the back matter, the lore, et cetera, that you guys have already mentioned, and I don't need to beat a dead horse. Just really speaks to something that could go on for a very, very long time and touch on a lot of different things. So kudos to them, because we don't see a lot of stuff like this anymore. You know, we just don't. This is the first Black Label book that's had this sort of look to it and feel and genre. And it's kind of becoming more apparent that the theme of Black Label, for lack of a better term, isn't genre specific or even creator specific, but it's simply comics for adults that are not unbound by genre or continuity. And in a lot of ways, it's the anti-Vertigo, if you think about where Vertigo was when it first started, because Vertigo was all fantasy, pretty much. I mean, there's, Doom Patrol, whatever, but fantasy, Hellblazer thrown in the mix, and, some other oddballs, but the label had a unified theme, right? Like, you knew pretty much tonally what you were going to get with with the Vertigo book in the 90s. And then gradually over time, as the 90s ended and we got Preacher and 100 Bullets and Scalped and all this, they shed their fantasy ID and started bringing all these other genres in. And in a way, it both strengthened and kind of held the label, or led to an identity crisis in the label, because suddenly they didn't know who they were. And Image was able to sweep in with all of the creator-owned stuff, and suddenly Image was the hot new sexy in town. But with Black Label, the identity simply seems to be, like I said, stories for grown-ups. And I'm down with that. Give me more. Batwang aside. Apparently Batman Damned was really good. I haven't read it. Cody loved it. So we're gonna give him that, and I trust Cody's opinion. So, but yeah, this is an awesome book. Some people might want to wait for the trade on this one. It seems like it's going to be a pretty big deal in terms of scope and execution. But man, I mean, getting this on a monthly basis, especially with that art, whoa, beautiful stuff. Really reminded me in the best way possible of Esad Rabik. And maybe with just a little bit more, a little brighter coloring on it, but awesome stuff. I love The Last God. Cannot recommend it enough, even if you're not a fantasy guy. So, guys, what do y'all have any more to add to that?
Yeah, I really agree with that last point, because as much as we've talked about this huge world and all the lore that's established, and also the last god is Molotep, the god in the void. That's technically his name. But that you have these things that are just lengthy. You read the journal articles and it's full of these long names and these intricate interactions between people and communities. But you pick up issue 1 and it doesn't feel like it's a chore to get through. It doesn't just drag on. It introduces you to this world really nicely in a concise way, and also starts to elaborate really well. So it's not something to be intimidated by. It's something that, jump on board now, because it's going to grow quick.
Good point. It is set up in a way that's very new reader friendly and doesn't just throw you in the deep end of all this lore that it's built. And that's important. Because that could have been a fatal misstep.
Definitely, and it definitely didn't do that. It brought you in almost easy into a world like this. I've read fantasy that is not so forgiving. You know, if you've read the Silmarillion that this is based on, you need your notepad to get through a book like that. And this is not that. It's a great time to read. It's just a lot of fun.
Mike?
No, you guys said it perfectly. It's kind of funny that Nick was saying that, this type of stuff isn't really for Eddie, because a lot of people get lost in high fantasy because it's just so much, it's just so layered. But as all of us said before, I mean, this reads just fine, whether you just want to thumb through it and be done with it, put it in a box, or if you want to go back and kind of study it and look stuff up and just really dive into the stories and to the characters and to the plot, you can do that as well.
Sweet. Yeah. So, okay, well, that's it for reviews for us this week. So, moving deftly into our final segment. What have you been reading? What are you looking forward to? Mike, new guy.
Oh, yeah.
In the hot seat. What do you got?
Oh, good. Yeah, pick on the new guy, because that's but
that's right.
Yeah. Now, keeping with the spooky Halloween theme, everyone's favorite 70s arena rock group Kiss has yet another new comic coming out in November, Kiss Zombies. So that should be pretty good. Looking forward to it. Obviously, their comics aren't serious. It's Kiss. Just take it for what it's worth. But it should be pretty good. I mean, their stuff is always fun to just read, thumb through, throw it in a box, come back to it a couple years later because you forgot you owned it in the first place. But it's still fun to read regardless. So, but it's good stuff. What I've been reading is diving back into everyone's favorite post-apocalyptic book, Why the Last Man.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. An all-time favorite of mine. Ampersand is my spirit animal. But yeah, that's always good. I mean, it's probably read it for the 1,000th time, but it's just so good, and I think I'm not comparing DCeased to Why the Last Man, but I think DCeased going down the road is going to be just as easily, rereadable as Why the Last Man. So
I think that's fair. And I mean, honestly, all due respect to Ex Machina and Runaways, Why the Last Man is what really gave us Brian K. Vaughan.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely did. Absolutely.
Oh, awesome. Nick, how about you?
Okay, yeah, so I guess I'm continuing with the spooky reading. That's a lifestyle for me, so anything I'm interested in is probably going to be spooky. But if I'm making an attempt at it, I'm going to go with the Dracula trade release that it kind of recently came out. It's from Roy Thomas and, of course, Mike Mignola. Ooh. He's a legend to me. I love almost anything the guy puts out. And it is Bram Stoker's Dracula. It tells that story, and it's everything that you want it to be. I would say it's better than the movies that we've seen. And I wish Cody was here because he knows so much about Dracula, and he's very into that story, and he understands the intricacies of it. But IDW put out this trade, and I didn't even know it was coming out. I was just walking by the store or by the shelf one day and saw it sitting there and thought, no way. Just one that you immediately pick up and have to buy, and love every bit of it. Just so good, so good. But what I'm looking forward to, heading into November, and it's still all spooky stuff, so cool stuff. IDW, I believe, is also putting out an Addams Family comic. I know they do a lot of licensed work, and this is based on the new animated movie that I haven't seen yet. But this October, I finally discovered the Addams Family and got into it. So it's a big deal for me, I don't care if it's not for you. Spawn 302 is happening, and that's kind of along the same notes. The huge record-breaking 300 301s over established this new direction for Spawn that's going to open it up to hopefully more issues, but also a few spin-offs. As a She-Spawn, come on. Mm-hmm. I would read that all day. And we also have the return of Ghost Rider from Marvel. Issue 2 is coming out. And just great stuff. Loved that one.
It's an
Burns
awesome
going
first
and then
issue.
Burns coming out. Yeah, it's just brilliant stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Matt, what about you?
Cool. Well, I have been trudging my way through Batman and Robin Eternal. Sadly, this does not live up to its predecessor, Batman Eternal. But I got it for like 50 cents an issue, so I was kind of obligated to try. And it's a lot of creators I like. It's Scott Snyder. It's James Tynion IV. It's a lot of good other people like Tim Seeley and Ed Brisson contributing, and just the story really isn't that great. I remember kind of vaguely hearing that it was more of a swing and a miss when it was coming out. Yeah, unfortunately. I'll probably sell this all on eBay when I'm done. But, well, I just don't ever see myself coming back to it. You know, why not? I hate it when that happens, though. Because Batman Eternal was freaking awesome. I mean, wow. What I'm looking forward to, well, Long Live the Legion. Legion of Superheroes #1 next week by Brian Michael Bendis and Ryan Sook. We've had the warm-up issues with the Millennium 2-parter and the stuff going on in Superman, and now it's showtime. Let's see what's up with this new Legion. I'm probably the only guy in his mid-30s to really find the Legion at that time of his life. One of those odd things that happened, but I love this team. I mean, they'll never replace my love for the X-Men or the JSA, but top 3 for sure. Yeah. So, hey, that's me. Guys, do you have any final thoughts this week?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, hey, yeah, so read your comics. That's it for us this week. I think we may have clocked in. We clocked in at under 50 minutes, guys. I'm very proud of us. Apparently, this new Hirsute trio of comic watchers is doing something right. I don't know. Maybe we need to find more to say. Maybe we were just terrible. I don't know. But anyway, hey, thank you all for listening. You can check us out on comic-watch.com, and you can check the show out on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, basically anywhere that you can find a podcast. We are there. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you next time.